Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you as always here in the podcasting studios at the Czech Media Group, one of our chamber champions. I'd like to acknowledge, as always, that I live and work in the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, the Songhees and Kusapsum. And all of this is made possible by the support of Island Savings, which is a division of First West Credit Union, who are redefining what banking can do for people, for community, and for the planet. I will often tell people I'm a guy that's been here 24 years. I moved here from landlocked Ontario, surrounded by ocean, surrounded by the water. I'm not a boater. I don't own a boat, which is why I love every opportunity to hop on a BC ferry. I think it's a world-class experience to me. And I just think the views are amazing. Anyway, it's all good. I'm a fan of ferries. I'll say that up front. We're going to talk about BC ferries and everything that's going on with them with the guy in charge. The CEO is Nicolas Jimenez. Nicolas, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
You bet. So 2 years into the job now, how's that been so far? What's the 2 years been like?
It has been quite something. I'm not obviously from the ferry community or even the marine community, but I have to tell you, it is very easy to get attached to this business, to this ferry system, to what it does for the province. So it's been the best 2 years of my working career, and I say that honestly. And I think I've had a pretty good working career now, but it's just been so fascinating. The issues are so multifarious and so complex and so important to communities. It really kind of pushes us every day to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that point the finger at ferries all the time. We'll talk about that later on. But in a sense of whether a business is a small one or a big one, there's short-term stuff and there's long-term stuff. So you're still kind of in the short-term frame. Is that fair to say?
I would say we're doing both. When I came in, obviously there were pretty significant challenges in the day-to-day for BC Ferries. We were coming out of COVID. COVID didn't treat this ferry system and certainly the company particularly well. It was very, very difficult to operate. And we had a lot of catch up to do. There were a lot of problems inside the system. We knew that, and the team had been working on that. And that was really the focus: get service reliability down, get our operational footprint more stable. But we also had to begin to look at renewal. COVID paused a lot of really important investments that the system needed to make, both in the terminals, but also in the vessels. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. We had to kickstart that and renew that because a lot of that backed up investments just compounded the problems of running old ships in old terminals against a very important set of needs within our communities and our traveling public.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the ships and stuff today. We're going to talk about staffing and all that sort of thing. But with the ships, there is a plan that's in place that proposes the creation of 5 new ships, which are needed for this aging fleet. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tell me about it.
Well, yes, there is a plan. We have a class of ships called the C class, and people would know them as the Queens, the Queen of Cowichan, Queen of Oak Bay, Queen of Surrey, etc. Those ships have reached end of life. They are, in some cases, 60 years old. The Queen of New West, an amazing ship, but right now sitting in a dry dock, getting its shaft and propeller replaced because it's sheared off from age. So this is a sign that these ships need to be replaced. It's not just replacing ships; it's that the system has grown. The needs of communities has grown, and the current sort of deployment of vessels in some of our key routes just can't keep up with capacity and demand. So we are investing, or we are proposing to invest significantly to increase the capacity and the number of ships that operate on our key routes, the routes that drive most of the revenue and operating income in the system.
Yeah, the whole rate structure is kind of interesting that there's pretty much, I believe it's 1 or 2 routes make money. The rest are subsidized by those 1 or 2 routes. So explain that to us.
Yeah, it's curious. I think a lot of people wouldn't recognize that in the system. They'd say, "Well, no, surely my ferry, I see it busy all the time. There's waits, throughout the summer." The reality is, and you're absolutely right, that the vast majority, we have 25 routes, and I would say in any given year, 23 and sometimes 24 of them are not generating any income. It is principally one route in the system, and sometimes two. The sort of the what we call the major routes. Tawas and Swartz Bay, Tawas and Duke Point, and then to a lesser extent Horseshoe Bay and Nanaimo. Those routes are generating all of the volume, more than 80%, and certainly are the only ones that are bringing a return in and of themselves. Now, what people also don't know, I think a lot of people assume that we're making a lot of money and this is a very profitable business. It's not. I can assure people we're losing money. The cost associated with running a system and maintaining the system and then renewing the system far exceeds what we're bringing in terms of revenues. Two-thirds of our revenue comes from customers, and then about a third, maybe a little less, comes from various forms of government, principally the provincial government. There's a huge gap today in what we need to run the system, and it's just not being made up for by revenues.
But you are an essential service. People on the Gulf Islands rely on you. We on the Big Island rely on you as a part of the supply chain. So you really are classified as an essential service.
Yeah, and it's funny. That's the thing that I came into the company and recognized instantly. This is an essential public service. It's not just a service; it's an essential public service. A lot of people think that either we're a private company or we're a crown corporation. We're sort of neither. Our primary shareholder is government, but our primary community of interest uh, is British Columbia. And so, in that sense, you're right. We are, call it what you want, a marine highway, a floating bridge. We connect communities, we connect people, and it's not just connecting people so that they can go and spend a July long weekend on the island or somewhere in the interior. I would say the vast majority of our travel is not people recreating, it's people living, people going to doctor's visits, going to and from work, people attending or looking after their families. We see it in the statistics when we generate kind of surveys of our customers. It is really about life, and that's what we're trying to connect here. Supply chains too. You mentioned we 10%, a little bit more than 10% of our business is commercial traffic. It is a huge contributor to island supply chains. I think we figure that we are the number one sort of fulfillment link in the online economy, and that's something that people have to recognize.
Yeah, I mean, when you see that, this Cold Star Solutions have trucks and Cisco and GFS and Neptune, they're running food back and forth. That's how we eat here.
It is. I heard a statistic, and I can't back it up, but I like it, and I'll say it anyway. That during COVID, it was recognized that the island had something like a 3-day supply of food
Yeah.
at any given time. And even if it's 4 days or 5 days, the reality is, there's an imperative for access to and from markets to bring food. Food security is a huge issue. So it's not just whether you order something off of Amazon. It's tomatoes, it's fresh fruit, it's meats, it's essentially the sustenance that keeps all of our communities alive,
Yeah.
thriving.
Yeah, we on Vancouver Island we import 90% of the food we consume, 90%, and a lot of
Right.
that gets here because of you guys. I want to talk about staffing. That's something that comes up quite often. We'll talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Nicolas Jimenez. He's the CEO of BC Ferries. I asked you a question a while ago. When we see ferry delays, right, which is what people get angry about quite often, how much of that is due to mechanical issues? How much of that is due to weather issues? And how much of that is due to staffing issues?
Well, today I can tell you it looks very different than it did 2 or 3 years ago. So I'll give you the numbers and we can get into the story after.
Okay.
I would say about 80% of delays today are mechanical and weather. Um, Very few delays today are caused by staffing, less than 7%. I can tell you last summer on our major routes, we had no delays or no cancellations, I'm sorry, as it relates to staffing. That's huge. It's incredible. You think back to what was happening in 2022 and 2023, that wasn't the case. And that's partially because we have brought in since 2022, I believe, more than 3,000 people have come through and joined the company net new. That is a massive investment in putting reliability into this critical service. In any given year, we obviously have peaks and valleys. So our summer is our peak, and our shoulder seasons are kind of late fall, winter, and early spring, we see a difference of 500 to 600 people in those two staffing levels. So we staff up for the summer. Another thing that we did, which was critical, was we addressed compensation. I think for years there was a gap between what we were paying and what people could get elsewhere in similar roles within the province, but elsewhere too. And we made a massive investment in people last year with a very sizable, the biggest increase in compensation in I think 40 years here at BC Ferries. And we've done other things too in terms of doubling down on training, because it's not just what you pay people; it's making sure people can advance and accelerate in their career. It's really important, particularly in this industry when so much of your growth is tied to getting certification and training to get to the next level. So we've been able to do a lot more of that in the last 2 years. There's other things, but I mean those are just some examples of things we have to do to make sure the system's reliable.
Yeah, attraction and retention of workforce is so important. It's the consistency and the continuity that you need to operate on a daily basis. So when you talk about the training that BC Ferries employees go through, you're required by Transport Canada to carry a certain number of people on the sailings. Hugely different from Washington State Ferries, for example, where they don't have those requirements. So talk a little bit about those two differences and what all these people do on the ships.
It is challenging, and it's different in Europe as well. I can give you an interesting story to that effect. So, yes, in Washington State, largely the same ships, largely the same routes and operating environment, but a very different requirement for crewing. And that at all rate comes down to the regulator. Now, I'm not blaming Transport Canada. I'm saying that Transport Canada has a different judgment on what is required to safely crew a vessel than other regulators in other markets nearby and abroad. So I can tell you, one of my colleagues, Northumberland Ferry, they bought a ship from Europe. That ship in Europe was staffed to a level of about 6 people. It comes here to Canada to operate, same ship, and the requirements are something like 17 to 20.
Hmm.
So, like an almost 3 times, more than 3 times, increase in the amount of people required to operate those vessels. And it is challenging for us in our environment. I mean, it's great because we can operate safely, and there is no doubt that we are one of the safest systems in the world. It's not for us safety first; it's safety always. And I think there's at times legitimate questions as whether there are requirements that put us in a above and beyond capacity for certain ships and certain routes.
Yeah, we began this thread by talking about the number of cancellations, what attributes to the cancellations. There's been some issues around the communication of all of that too, that people are wondering how the message about delays and cancellations will be managed. That seems to have changed a little bit and gotten somewhat better and more robust.
It has, and we recognized, I think, that we have not just an obligation, but there's a critical need to be able to communicate with people who are using your service, particularly as we're asking people increasingly to reserve their travel on the major routes. And so we've done a bunch of things to address that. So we've improved the way in which we communicate with people. You can sign up for service notices. We've increased cameras at really all of our terminals and giving people access to those cameras online. We've put out an app in the last 2 years, which is getting huge traction and is a really effective way to sort of monitor and manage your travel. We've increased the notifications people are getting. We've doubled down on the tools themselves. So not only did we put an app, but we've actually improved the way current conditions reads, which I will admit, when I first joined, I didn't think it was perfect, and I think I was not alone in that. I think there were a number of people who would have said things could be clearer. So I give full credit to the team that's really worked hard to put better tools into the mix. They've also worked hard, I think, to be more transparent. So we started doing things that we hadn't really done in the past, like talking to people about refits. And refits are those maintenance periods that we go through between September and May, giving people a little bit of a clue as to what that looks like, how complex it is, how long a ship sits in dry dock or in one of our repair facilities getting upgraded. Why is it complicated? Why does it cost so much money? And why does it take so many people to get that work done? So, I think you can understand a system a little bit better when you actually understand what's inside the system and what it takes to run the system. So we're trying to do more and more of that.
And without this sounding like an oversimplified question, but why do you think there are complaints about BC Ferries? Because you're a bit of a lightning rod for a lot of people who say, "Oh, ferries are no good. I don't like the ferries. I don't want to rely on them." But what there is so much good to be told about what you're doing, and we're going to do that here today. Why do you think there's been that sort of backlash and reluctance to tell the upside of the story?
Well, I mean, look, the reality is, how many headlines do you read that says plane lands safely? You know, I'm not being critical of media at all, and I think the responsibility for us isn't to wonder why there aren't good stories being told, but to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to put a service out there that is meeting the needs of everybody traveling. And it's 23 plus million people using the service a year. When 98.5% of our sailings go out as planned. So it's a very, very small number of sailings that don't quite work the way we want them to. But it doesn't matter for anyone using the system if 98 or 99% sailings go. It's the day that you needed to get to where you needed to go, and I get that. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
we all experience that, whether we're flying, taking the train, or taking a ferry. So really, I think our job is to not be in the business of self promotion, but to be in the business of reliability and operating in a way that kind of meets what people expect of us, and we'll let the story tell itself is what we're trying to do.
Part of maybe the way I feel is because of the fact that in 24 years I have never experienced a ferry delay. It's just made good luck on my part. I never have. It's never happened to me. But
Well, they don't happen often, and it's true. On some routes, we have more problems than others. Our routes between Horseshoe Bay and Langdale are certainly challenged. And I think what people sometimes don't appreciate or understand is that when we are delayed, particularly, for example, on that route, it's not because something has gone wrong in the system. It's because we're trying to get more people on. Um, getting 4 or 5 more cars on can take 4 or 5 minutes. And that's really important for the people who get on that sailing and don't get stranded and have to wait a sailing. But it accumulates over the course of the day, which is also challenging. So our staff really runs that very fine line of, do I bring 10 more vehicles on, or do I hold the traffic, get out on time, and put those 10 vehicles into the next sailing? And that's a tough call to make uh, on a busy sailing day, whether it's a long weekend or a peak summer period. So we are always trying desperately to sort of run the fine balance of keeping on time, but also making sure that we can get as many people into a sailing as possible.
another bit of good news that isn't probably talked about quite enough, but we're going to talk about it next, and that is how you best steward the water upon which you sail. Our guest today on Chamber Chats is Nicolas Jimenez. He is the CEO of BC Ferries. So you guys are doing all kinds of things. In broad terms, I'll just say environmental sustainability, but you're doing a lot of things to steward the oceans.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to thump our chest
Oh,
here.
go for it. Oh, do it. Yeah.
Well, um, I I don't know that people would know this, but we've been working with Oceans Network Canada for something like a decade, and they've been putting sensors on a lot of our ships to get sort of oceanographic, it's a hard word to say, and atmospheric information and data, and it's helping them build models to understand the health of our oceans, salinity, and a whole bunch of other really important variables that they then use in other forms of research. So that's a huge partnership. In fact, I was at a conference last Thursday where they were presenting on this partnership that's been going on, how the sensors work, what data they capture, and where they're used in research, both in universities and for other purposes. Another thing that we're doing that I think is really important is working to monitor the health and passage of our whale populations. So we've seen a huge resurgence of that populations of some of the resident pods and non-resident pods in the last couple of years, and we're working with lots of different institutes and local First Nations to sort of make sure that that data is there. We've also had to work, I think, closely with our partners when strikes occur. So since I've been here, we've had at least 2 and possibly more whale strikes, and that's the first time that those have happened in a very long time, at least as long as people can remember. So it's really important that not only do we provide research and data monitoring tools, that we would provide quick response and quick action in the event that we cannot physically get out of the way of a pod or have a strike. I know one event that happened 2 summers ago where a whale, I think it was a gray whale, surfaced. I think it was like 50 feet off the starboard of the northern, I think it was the northern expedition. And the teams literally couldn't do anything other than deal with the impact. So immediately we went into sort of our response mode. But those kinds of things I think are really important and part of our responsibility as we exist and operate in these waterways.
Yeah, that's too bad that happens, but it's the reality of operating. Another environmental
It
side
is.
too is that the electrification of the ferries. Tell me about that.
It is. It's really exciting. We are working to decarbonize our fleet, and that's going to take obviously probably a generation because we have 37 vessels. But it is a very, very important investment. We spend something like $160 million on fuel. The vast majority of the fuel that we use is diesel, and it is conventional marine diesel, not biodiesel and not LNG. We do in some of our vessels, but not the majority. Our new vessels, our island class ships, that we're building 4 right now with a shipyard in Romania, Daman. They will be hybrid electric, but they will be operating as fully electric vessels, which I think is fantastic. We are the new major vessels, which we talked about before. The plan is that they would be hybrid electric, all electric ready. So hybrid electric means that they can operate in both forms of propulsion, so electric and diesel. They will be ready on day one to operate with biodiesel. That will be a huge, improvement in terms of our GHG emissions. Huge. They will also be all electric ready, so that when we have energy supplies figured out and put into the major terminals where they're going to operate, that they can then switch to an all electric mode of propulsion. So that's down the road, but having that ability to sort of future proof your business is a huge step forward for our efforts to decarbonization.
Well, I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it today, and I appreciate your time. We will catch up again soon. Yours is not an easy job, but it's great to see that you're enjoying it so much. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for your time today.
Okay, this was great. Thanks so much.
You bet. Nicolas Jimenez, the CEO of BC Ferries. I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.